All right, hey folks, so welcome back to part two. This video is going to be focusing on the dynamic effort method, and I want to talk you through this. Now, yesterday's video, the introduction video, was very much a theoretical look at who needs this and why you need it and what you can gain from it. This video is very much a practical view on what you can implement in your own training over the next 9 weeks or so, and how to actually plan that out. So firstly, thanks for making it onto my channel. If you have any questions about today, any comments, pop them down below in the discussions. I do try and get back to everyone. Usually once a week, I set aside some time to answer all the comments. So if I don't get back to you straight away, that's the reason why. Also, YouTube isn't my main thing. I'm mostly a coach. So if you would like some actual direct coaching from me, there's a link in the description. Click on that. There's no obligation to click on it. Fill out some details and I'll get back to you. We can start to talk about your goals and how I can help. But anyway, let's get on with the video. So today we are going straight into sort of some of the practical things that I want to talk about. So essentially, why do we need this? So we've established at this point, your progress is stalled out, and typically the lifts which you use to gauge your progress have stalled, and they've been stalled for a while. You might make a little progress, you backslide, you get injured, you make a little progress, you get injured, but roughly you've been at the same level for a while, and it might take a while for you to realize you're actually stalled. But there we go. For powerlifters, it's quite easy because it's the bench, squat, and deadlift. For a lot of other gen pop lifters, they tend to vary things so much. So 1 month they're doing bench press, next month they're doing machine press, so it's harder for them to tell they're stalling out. But after a while, you kind of realize you're stuck, and then you start to look for answers, which may have led you onto YouTube. Now, so just doing the lift to get better at the lift works to a certain point, okay? Now, to get better at the lift, what we need to do now is we need to vary things. So there's a certain contradiction that happens. So to get better at the lift, we need to do the lift or a close variation. But also, if we continue to do the lift or the close variation, we get burnt out, all right? You see how that's a contradiction. So that's the contradiction that most people deal with. Up until that point, what they were doing worked great, but now they'll do it for a few weeks, they'll burn out, and then they don't know why. And it takes a certain time, as I say, to actually realize, you know, you're actually stuck. So the solution is, this is where one of the methods that we use, if we're looking at conjugate method, is we add in something called what they call dynamic work. It's what's also called speed work, and just generally some people call it light work. I call it light work in my tactician program. Whatever you call it, it amounts to much of the same thing. I don't want us to be very strict about the definitions here, because we are aiming to get better. We're not aiming just to fit into a box. So a lot of the definitions that I give here about linearity, for example, conjugation, undulation, they're very broad definitions, because I'm not interested in boxing you guys into one particular expression of the method. I want you guys to have your mind open, because the end goal is progress. It's not to do the method as written. Okay, it's very important to bear that in mind. I don't give a damn about having precisely, you know, worked out methods. I just want you to progress. So whatever you call it, that's one of the things that needs to be added in, and that's what we're discussing today. So how do we do this? So I'm going to give you some practical examples of how you can implement this for your bench press. Literally starting Monday, you can start this. So I would say, say if you're going to bench once a week, you no longer do it for like heavy sets of 5s or 8s or 12s, or whatever you're doing before. You move to a 3-week wave in the first instance. And in that 3-week wave, what I want you to do is 6x6 with 1-minute rest periods. Now the 6x6 is usually going to be a lot higher in volume and a lot higher in density than what you were used to before. That provides two different ways to vary the stress. So firstly, it's a high degree of density. So you're only resting 1 minute between these sets. And secondly, you're usually doing more volume than you were previously. So let's say you normally did 3 sets. Here you would do 6 sets, okay? If you're normally doing 5 sets, and here you're doing 6 sets. So first 3-week wave, go for 6x6. Now you should start with a relatively comfortable weight, so that you can jump it 10 pounds or 5 pounds in the next week and jump it again in the next week. So you're reaching, you know, what should be a very challenging weight by the end of the 3-week wave, a weight which you might fail at on the last few sets, but you're getting that workload in. Now, I also want you to you're by necessity, you're going to be doing this with a relatively light weight. Because it's light, you want to be moving it fast. I don't care about using tendo units to measure how fast you're moving. It's not about that. Okay, at this level that we're talking about here, it's not about that. So again, don't be overly concerned with these really sort of like high level esoteric things that are said you need to do for the dynamic method. You just need to get the work in. It's more important to get the work in, get it done 6 by 6 with a 1 minute rest, so we can plan the rest of the 9-week progression. So do that for 3 weeks, hit some decent weights by the end of the 3 weeks on 6 by 6. Then go back to the start, second week, 3-week wave, use the 8 by 8. Now, you might have to adjust the poundages a little bit to hit the 8 by 8. Probably you'll have to back cycle a little bit. Maybe you'll have to back cycle to more than what you did in week 1. But either way, pick a reasonable weight you can do for 8 by 8. Now, that's a lot of work. That's probably more work on the bench than most of you are used to. Do that for 3 weeks. Then do the next wave for 10 by 10. 10 by 10 for another 3 weeks. That represents a 9-week cycle. Now, in that 9-week cycle, you've ramped volume to huge amounts, but also you've kept the speed the same, because you shouldn't be grinding out these reps. Bear in mind, they're all to be done with a 1 minute rest period. And you're only supposed to really fail on the final week, maybe of each cycle, of each 3-week wave. You shouldn't even really fail then. It's just a case of getting that work in. Get the work in, make sure it's good quality work, 1 minute rest period, pick something reasonable. Don't wear down your joints by failing on every single set. That is wrong. If you've picked a too heavy weight in the first week, back it down. Okay, your 6s should be easy, your 8s should be easy, your 10s should be easy. It's the sheer workload which is what's going to stress your muscles and stress that movement pattern. Now, in terms of how we do this for the squat, so for the squat, we're also doing something quite similar. I have tried the 6 by 6 and the 8 by 8 for the squat, but it ends up being just a little bit too much work for that particular movement pattern. So what I tend to do is I go with a 5 by 5 with a regular bar, no box. And then second week, 3-week wave, I go with a 5 by 5 with a regular bar on a box. And then I move to a 5 by 5. I either switch the bar, so use like a safety squat bar, or I add bands and I go for a box. Now, I'm going to cover this a bit more afterwards, but I'll cover the deadlift as well. But really, the idea is just to vary things. Like, it doesn't really matter how you vary stuff. So that's just one example of how I do things. Same with the bench press. It's one example of how I do things, but it's a very good example. The bench press was taken from Louis Simmons from Westside Barbell. That's how he's talked about doing the bench press cycle. That was an idea he got from Bill Sino, who was a bodybuilder powerlifter from back in the day. With regards to the squat, though, it's really just a case of varying things. You just don't want to grind away at the same thing over and over again. And bear in mind, this should be done with 1 minute rest period as well. But just vary stuff. If you don't have another bar, it doesn't matter. If you don't have bands, it doesn't matter. Just try and vary things. Even if you end up doing one of the cycles, one of the waves with front squats, again, it's fine. Just try and vary things. So when you repeat the 9-week cycle, you have a baseline to try and beat, and you're at least working that movement pattern. So just try and vary things. And same thing with the deadlift. Just try and vary things. Here's a suggestion of what you can do. First 3-week wave, 10 by 1, so 10 singles. And normally, if you're doing singles for the deadlift, I go with about 30 seconds rest. I have tried to do repetitions. So for speed work on the deadlift, doesn't work as well. I tried doing 5 by 3, so 5 triples. It just doesn't work as well. If you're trying to pull as hard as you can, usually singles tend to be the best here. So a sample cycle you could run is 3 weeks of 10 singles. Again, 30-second rest in between sets, fairly lightweight, probably 60 to 70% of your 1 rep max. Second week, 3-week wave, 15 by 1, so 15 singles. And then third week, recycle your poundages and start with 15 singles with bands. And the next time you do the 3-week cycle, aim to beat the numbers. All right, so now to what does this actually accomplish? Why are we doing this? So this is, it's very different from what you guys would normally do up until this point. Up until this point, you've just been pounding away at the lift. You might be thinking, well, this is very, very unusual. Okay, what is this going to accomplish? Firstly, this allows you to train the lifts you're concerned about improving. It allows you to train them relatively hard with lots of practice. Okay, so you're still getting the lifts in that you want to improve. So for a lot of people, it's the bench squat, deadlift. For you, it might be slightly different lifts, front squat, for example, push press, for example, whatever it is. But it allows you to train the lifts you're concerned with hard, which means you get practice in and the practice builds strength. Also, it allows you to vary things so as not to get stale. Like, you are past the point where you can do things week in, week out and improve. Otherwise, you wouldn't be listening to this video, okay? So the 3-week waves work extremely well in allowing you to have enough variety that you can vary things so you don't get stale. So you're not looking to progress every, week. You're looking to progress probably more like every 9 weeks when it comes around to the same repeat of the previous cycle. So you're varying things enough and you're looking to progress on a much longer scale. And also the speed work, the light work, whatever you want to call it, it allows you the recovery to do a lot of extra stuff in the week, which is what's going to contribute to you getting stronger. More on that later. Now, in terms of what very strong lifters do, very big, very strong lifters, they generally do better on traditional higher set, lower rep sets. I'm not going to get into that in this video, but you can see traditional West Side Barbell literature on that. So it looks more like 8 to 12 sets of 1 to 2 reps. Whereas the stuff I've detailed in this video has been much more for that late stage beginner, early stage intermediate who has stalled out and is looking for something else to do. For the guy who's been stuck at that 1.5 plate bench, 2-plate bench, whatever it is, and wants to get to the next level, this is something you can start to implement immediately. And it's a suggestion for something you can do for all of the lifts which you're concerned with. So just to kind of summarize today, right? We're doing this because we've stalled out on traditional linearity. And again, don't get hung up on that definition, but just your basic adding weight to the bar, doing things in a linear way. We've stalled out on that, so we need a change of stimulus. We do still want to do the lifts which we want to improve on, but at the same time, we need a variety of stress. The workload here, the speed of the workload is going to help, and just the regularity of doing the exercise without wearing down the joints and the movement patterns is going to help massively. One of the issues with sort of traditional, what is referred to as linear periodization, which is the lowering of volume and increasing of intensity, is that by the end of the cycle, your volume is just horrendously low, which means you get really slow and unfit. You don't get that with this approach. With this approach, your volume stays pretty consistently high, and you're able to do that because you are managing the intensity by reducing the rest periods and reducing the weight and making it hard in different ways. So works very, very well. It means you're not slogging away at those really heavy, really damaging 3s and 5s over and over again. That kind of stuff, it's fine if it's varied, but on the same lifts over and over again, it causes you to stall, which is why you're watching this video. So some very, very practical guidelines there on the lifts, which you can implement. Over the next couple of days, I'll be looking at the maximum effort method, that is lifting heavy, and the repetition effort method, which is basically all the rest of it. Essentially, that's what it is. It's literally all the rest of it. So for today, we are focused on the lifts we want to improve. The next 2 days are going to be focused on building up the areas of the body and the movement patterns which are weak in us. So bit of a prelude until tomorrow. I'll speak to you more in the next video about the max effort method and some of my practical guidelines for implementing that. All right, folks, hopefully that was useful. Let me know what your thoughts, and I'll speak to you more in the next one.